everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Nonprofit Show. Chloe Boonstra, this is like International Day because you're coming to us from where?
I am coming from very snowy Ontario, Canada today. Yes, international guest. I feel very special. Hi, Julia.
International best guest. That's the best. Well, you know, we love our friends to the north. North America is really the center of the planet when it comes to the nonprofit and NGO space. And it's always just a joy to learn how our folks in the north are doing things. But today, Chloe is here with us with our friends from Bloomerang, and which Bloomerang works with folks all over the world, don't you?
We do, yes. So I am Canadian. I'm one of few. We serve primarily in the U.S., international as well. So all over the place a little bit, yeah. So it's been great for me to kind of expand my customer base. It's been super wonderful.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, we're going to talk about something that's really near and dear to the heart of anyone working in the nonprofit sector, and that's turning volunteers into donors. And I can't wait to have this conversation. I've been looking forward to this for a long time, Chloe, because a lot of folks in the nonprofit sector will be like, keep your hands off my volunteers. And there's this like drama that
Yep.
if you talk to volunteers about becoming a donor, that you lose them or you offend them, or it's just such a complicated thing. So I'm really excited to explore this with you, and I hope you can, help us to understand why this shouldn't be such a drama, because man, this
Yeah.
has this is just fraught with a lot of tension within organizations. So we're going to really delve into that. What's not fraught with tension are our amazing partners, and they include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting, Interim Executives Academy, Your Part-Time Controller, and Fundraisers Friday. I'm Julia C. Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy. Meredith Terrian was going to be on this show today, but she's got the flu. So we're sending her our best wishes, and we'll see her shortly on another episode of the Nonprofit Show. So Chloe Boonstra, our dear friends to the north, coming to us from Canada. What in the heck does a senior customer service manager do? Because that's a big title.
Yeah, it's a big title, and it's such an amazing job. So yes, senior customer success manager over at Bloomerang, and I get the privilege really of just working with nonprofits every single day. So helping them get the most out of their volunteer engagement strategies and of course their tech. And I just feel so lucky to be a part of their journey, right? Whether that's getting their teams up and running on the platform or brainstorming new ideas to enhance the volunteer experience. Every conversation I have, Julia, with these organizations is just a chance for me to learn and grow. And I'm just constantly reminded of how powerful the right tools are and how that can amplify a mission. So it's just been really fulfilling to see teams thrive and just be a part of that process. It's just like a constant reminder of what's possible when we all work together towards something bigger than ourselves.
Yeah, I love that you said that, because that's the spirit of volunteerism. Like, people that come together, and it can be intimidating because they don't know what they're going to be doing. They don't know, how to be efficient. They want to be positive. They want to be engaging. I mean, you have to get yourself out there to volunteer. And then once you do, and if you are a repeat volunteer, that becomes like a whole nother level of ownership that people take. And, I think it's a really powerful thing that we have in society, and that we need to be thoughtful about too. So go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, when we treat our volunteers and our donors like the unique people that they are, amazing things happen. So I'm excited to dive in. And yes, let's just get right into it.
So this is my sense of it, and correct me if you think I'm wrong. I feel like we don't have language for it, and we don't have policy for it for the most part. But I feel like we treat our donors and our volunteers as two completely different things, and we never even think of them as being one or combined. And right off the top, do you see that within these relationships?
100%. And The word I like to use, Julia, is hesitancy, right? There's this hesitancy to engage with donors and volunteers
Yeah.
in the same way. And I see it all the time. And I think there's a couple of things that kind of play into this. One, there's just the lack of insights. We don't know who's volunteering and who's giving. And so there's that hesitancy to make asks for more when we just don't understand our donors very well. And then, of course, there's just capacity, right? Having the right tools to help you kind of understand your base and, make an ask. So I see it all the time, that hesitancy and just not understanding how to communicate with donors and volunteers alike, totally separate tracks all the time.
And, I feel like when you go into an organization that has, a larger organization where maybe they have a full-time volunteer coordinator, volunteer coordinating staff or whatever, and then you have fund development, their offices aren't housed in the same area. They are really like, don't get near my, volunteers, don't get near my donors. Like there's a sense that if there is some sort of engagement, and I love your word hesitancy, that you're going to destroy the whole relationship.
Right. Or that will just ask too much of people, right? I think there's the hesitancy of, well, if they're giving time, I can't ask them to give money, right? And that, I think, is a really common misconception, right? Those that are giving time or money are those that are already really committed. So you just want to nurture that relationship so that ask becomes a little bit more natural and feels a little bit more authentic.
Yeah, I love that you just said described it that way, because I kind of feel like you could use that if you are in one of those teams trying to go to the other team and engage them with this conversation. Because let's be honest here, there's going to have to be some internal selling to get some organizations on the same page about this.
100%. And Julie, like you've said, there are some barriers. Like you've said, different offices. I also think working in a remote world makes interdepartmental conversations and connection very hard too. And so being committed to the overall value of connecting systems or looking at those two tracks together is super important. So getting aligned on that, of course, is going to be super important. And we can chat a little bit about that value too, of course.
Yeah. So we understand that we need to be doing this and be looking at it in a different way. How do we identify these volunteers to become potential donors? Is this like the same for everybody that walks through to a volunteer event, or what are you advising us on this?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And here's the thing, it's not necessarily about guessing or making assumption. The key is actually to just observe, right? People show how engaged they are through their actions, right?
Yeah.
So I read a study. So according to the National Philanthropic Trust, 70% of donors say they were first involved with an organization as a volunteer before ever making a donation, which I just love that, because what it highlights is just how closely connected volunteerism and donor behavior really are. When someone feels personally connected and engaged, they are more likely to give financially too. So really, just by paying attention to a few key behaviors and continuing to build these relationships, you can create a natural pathway from volunteer to donor. So like I said, one that feels authentic and mission driven and less awkward and inauthentic, right? It just feels natural.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that you said that. 70%.
Yep.
Holy moly, we don't even get 70% engagement from people attending events.
Mm-hmm. Volunteers are of the most loyal supporters, right? And I think often they're untapped in terms of their financial support, again, because we're just so worried. We're worried we don't want to overwork our volunteers, and it's just not the case. They're willing to give more. They love the cause. They're there, boots on the ground. And so it's just about fostering that relationship and making that connection a little bit stronger.
So let's talk about these strategies for converting our volunteers into donors. And I want to start with this notion, and I'm going to pull it back onto the nonprofits, is that, if we have teams of volunteer coordinators or volunteer management, it's got to start there, because I think those are the folks that are like, I don't do fundraising, I don't do fund development, to go back to your magical word, hesitancy. That it's internal and it's that leadership. So how do we begin to rethink and create a new strategy?
100%. It's such a good question. In my experience, it comes down to two things. Kind of leads what we just talked about. It's context and
Mm,
it's care, right? We're not
mhm,
just asking them for money, we're asking them to deepen their connection to the cause.
mhm,
So I think the most important thing to call out too, Julia, is timing, right? Because like I said, there's that hesitancy. And so before we go to make an ask or, convert a volunteer into donor, I want to take a step back and think of a couple things first. How often have they volunteered, right? If someone's brand new, if they just volunteered once for the first time, it might be a little too early to ask for a donation. So that's a relationship you might want to grow a little bit first.
mhm.
Now, if somebody comes in and if they've volunteered, for many years, right, and they've been there consistently, that's someone, of course, who is a prime candidate to become a donor because they've shown through their actions that they're committed to the cause. And so it's
Mhm.
all about, like I said, observing and then using that understanding to your advantage. Be specific, right? Ask them to support an area that they already volunteer in. It makes it personal, right?
Yeah, smart.
Or
Smart.
consider asking them to volunteer in a special project or a campaign that aligns with their interest, right? The more targeted and more relevant the ask is, the more likely it is to resonate and empower them to continue their contribution.
Mhm. So, Chloe, I'm thinking back to some board service where we were, as board members, we were always required, it was part of our policy, for once a year to act on a volunteer project, not as a board member, but
Mhm.
to kind of witness like how it was managed and what went on, and it was more educational, right? And at the end of the board, or at the end of the volunteer environment, there were two things that most of the board felt was missing, and it became a huge drama. And one of them was we felt that there should be a needs list presented. And it was like, these are the things that we need, like diapers or formula or books or whatever. You could go to your big box store and throw a couple of these items in, or you could go onto Amazon and you could directly have them delivered to this place. And the other was join our monthly giving society.
Mm.
And we felt like for the volunteer coordinators that were super against this, we felt like if we just had a physical card or brochure, in essence, that we could conclude the volunteer experience. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that, because we never had a professional voice to guide us. It was just more, our own feelings that we had,
Mhm.
and it was very controversial.
Yeah, tell me a little bit more in terms of what was controversial. I'm curious. Elaborate a little bit more for me.
Because you said, and I've already repeated your word, hesitancy, but
Mhm.
the volunteer coordinating team, and it was good size. I mean, I think they had like 4 or 5 employees.
Mhm.
They felt that we were going to drive away their volunteers and that it was too much of a sales pitch. And they felt like that was, not healthy for the volunteer ecosystem, in a bad way, to end the volunteer experience. And
Fine.
and us, we were like, wow, they're all revved up. This
Mhm.
is when you should extend it. So help me to reframe that.
Yeah, 100%. I think a better way of framing that situation in particular is you want to think about stating impact, right? When it comes to asking people to give more, like you've said, it can come off as an impersonal ask, or at the end of a donation or at the end of a volunteer event, you just get a simple donate here button and it kind of steers people away. And so the more that we can frame the impact that volunteers have, the more effective that ask is going to be. And so my
Hmm.
thought is that if we can frame this a little bit more like, your support at the food pantry helped us serve 200 families in this month. we're so grateful. Would you consider helping us expand this with a monthly gift? So if we can target the impact and make that a little bit more specific, volunteers are just going to see that as a natural extension of their support, not as a nag or an ask that seems impersonal or an afterthought. So in short, it can seem controversial. And I've heard that before. Again, like you said, that hesitancy to engage volunteers to contribute in more ways. But like we talked about, they're already in their boots on the ground. Their folks are already in it. And so all we really just need to do is showcase that impact and show that we care about them and want them to continue their impact with us in the organization.
So I love that, because I think you're right. I mean, if you're in the back room sorting cans or washing dishes, you're going to probably need more information about what your impact was. So that leads me to my next question to you. Do you believe that should be done like on site as that volunteer is there or leaving or ending their shift or whatever? Or should that be a communication that is done after they're there, digitally through text, email, maybe even snail mail? I mean, what does the arc of that journey look like to you?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And I often talk about, talking to volunteers, asking them how they prefer to be thanked is a really powerful thing, and often and not something that's thought about very often.
Yeah.
And so if volunteer A prefers just a quick shout out or a personal handwritten note, then that's something that we could easily do. It only takes a couple minutes. And if we have volunteers who prefer to get an email, then of course we can continue on in sort of our regular operations and how we usually thank volunteers. But what I think is actually most impactful is asking volunteers for feedback and asking them what makes them feel most appreciated and most acknowledged.
Okay, so again, then let me follow up with another question. Is that done on site, through some sort of like paper survey, or is that done? I mean, I know a lot of organizations actually will have kiosks where they have iPads and they use that going in and they use that going out, or is this an email communication afterwards? Like, what does that journey look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it all depends on each individual person's situation and their tech stack. I think personally, on site, boots on the ground is the best way to interact with volunteers. I think in a world where everything is digital, we've lost touch a little bit. And I think we forget the importance of how far a simple conversation or a quick chat after a shift can be. So my mind kind of splits in two ways, Julie, honestly. I think in person and those personal touch points are really important. But I also think from a data perspective, being able to look for patterns like frequent attendance, tracking those interactions, and being able to look at that a little bit more holistically is also really important as well. So I kind of see it in both ways. I know that's kind of a double answer, but we'll go with it.
Well, what you just said made me think. A lot of volunteer coordinators are so task specific. They're trying to get the bodies to sort the cans, wash the dishes, like we said, and they're not able or even thinking about, okay, post activity, looking, as you said, at the data points and getting a better sense of actually what's happened. Because they're trying to fill, a labor. It's really becomes like a labor and supply and demand issue.
100%. I think we often forget how busy we like our nonprofit volunteer coordinators are, our fundraisers. And in my experience, you need that backup of a system, like you've said, to just be able to focus on your mission, to do your task focus, to repurpose your time, but then to also have that reassurance that I can go in and check in on site and see how my volunteers are doing and chatting with them, but I don't have to check everybody in and make sure their hours are tracked properly because you have, the reassurance of a great system or a tech stack to help you do that. So I see it sort of as a kind of a double-edged sword, if you will.
Yeah. You just said something that reminded me of a recent volunteer effort I had, and it was very apparent that this organization that does amazing work, I'm not trashing them at all, but they were so worried about tracking those hours that I felt like they weren't even like looking at me or tracking me. They were,
Yep.
they were trying to like some report was due. They needed those hours. And
Yes.
I remember thinking I was uncomfortable, but I couldn't articulate it just like you did. It was very interesting.
It's so true, Julia. I think that there are a lot of things that go into that when it comes to tracking hours or being able to report back on the impact. A lot of organizations are required to provide that information. And you're right. If you don't have the right tools, the right support, and you're focused on getting that information so that you can report to the right people or can create those reports. And so you're right, we're losing the ability to repurpose that time, like I said, to do those things, like to have those 5-minute conversations with donors. And you're right, it's such an unfortunate situation because those are need to do tasks, and they miss out on just the genuine connections. I see it all the time, and it's definitely a problem.
I mean, it's heartbreaking that you would say you see it all the time, because I just remember, I don't want to say I felt icky, but it wasn't a great way to start. And I couldn't, like I said, I couldn't articulate it. And I mean, this is my world. I talk about this every day. And even I could sense what they were trying to do. But then I felt underappreciated, I guess. Isn't that interesting? Because it's such a human emotion.
100%. And it's true. And it's funny like you said that, because our volunteers are feeling underappreciated, and our volunteer coordinators are also likely feeling really overwhelmed and very stressed. And you've hit it on the head there, Julia. And I think, people do the best that they can. And it's just highlights the importance of having the right tools around you. And when I talk to my customers, that's the first thing that we talk about in all of our meetings is what can we do to repurpose that time so that you are spending 5 to 10 minutes a day looking at your reports, and not, hours a day plus during the event not being able to connect. So it's definitely something that I lead with in all of the conversations, because like I said, the most important thing is just to understand your volunteers and just build that stronger bridge between volunteerism and contributing financially and just deepening that relationship. It's just super, super important. So yes, the most that we could do to keep volunteers engaged, say hi to them, have quick chats, the more, like you said, they're going to feel valued, they're going to come back. And it's really those small things that bring people back and make them feel acknowledged and recognized. And so I know our volunteer coordinators, our nonprofit leaders are busy and they're wearing many hats. And I think it's just to focus on a couple of small things. Julia, I thought of 2 small things, if I could take away from today, that people could do. Look through your volunteer list and pick 2 to 3 names, right? It could be folks that volunteer regularly, who went above and beyond recently, and just send them a personalized thank you message and just be specific. Try it out and see what happens, like what kind of response you get, and just share a quick update with them. You could also call a donor for the first time, right? If they complete a shift, call them in the first 24 hours and just say, hey, like, thanks so much for your time today. It really made a difference. And fostering that relationship. And instead of just, recruiting new volunteers and getting people in the door, let's close the leaky bucket and keep everyone in our system and engaged. And so that's what I would recommend doing this week. If there's that takeaway, is just connect with who you already have and try a couple different strategies that only take a couple minutes. That could, again, ideally help you repurpose your time later as well.
Chloe, I like what you said. And I think this just struck me, is that, you said take 2 or 3 folks that you've had an engagement with. And I think a lot of times when we have these discussions, and even on the nonprofit show, I will get a sense of, okay, this is going to be a heavy lift because we've got, hundreds here and thousands there. And then you think, how can I manage all this? How can I do all this? But I think the lessons that you could get from those 2 to 3 interactions could transform the way you think about this. It's really smart.
100%. And in my philosophy is it's just day by day, right? It's like volunteer by volunteer. It doesn't have to be a major push. And sometimes we don't have the capacity to do that, and that's okay. That doesn't necessarily mean we can't just take small steps. And that's just it. And so that's kind of my thought, is the more that we can just connect with our donors, the more empowered we're going to feel to continue to connect and continue to foster that relationship. And also think of new ways to connect with donors, like I've said, or volunteers, excuse me. Like I said, it's really, really impactful, like I've said, to just ask volunteers how they like to be talked to, how they like to be emailed, how they like to be thanked. Just get a sense of that and just continue to engage with them.
Well, that was a Freudian slip that you said about donors, because we don't have a lot of time left, but I want to spend this last amount of time that we have talking about those donors that were once volunteers, that came through that, experience. What are your thoughts? Like, if somebody moves into that donor position, does that mean necessarily that they're going to stop being a volunteer?
It's a really, really good question, and ideally, no, right? So
Yeah.
exactly, we wanna keep that ball rolling, and exactly that, how do we keep the momentum going? And you really wanna treat them like the rock star they are. At Bloomerang, we call them super supporters, so it's those that are giving both time and money. I know, I love that, super
I
supporter. What
love that.
it's so
That's,
good.
Chloe, that paints a picture.
Mhm. And it just does such a good job too, right? Because they just truly believe in what you're doing, and it's so reassuring. And so your job, nonprofit leader, is to just make sure that they feel that appreciation on both sides. That's what's really important. So one of my favorite things to say is blend volunteer appreciation with donor stewardship, and don't treat those things like two totally separate tracks. It's really, really important to think of those the
Yeah.
same.
Well, you've transformed I'm thinking there needs to be a category on all CRMs. It's SS, super supporter.
Super supporter, exactly.
Because to me, to my way of thinking, these are people that bring others on tour, that bring others to volunteer, that are like, hey, family, instead of giving presents this year, we're going to, do a drive for this group or whatever. I mean, I think that super supporter mentality is a great, great way to think about how we can be breaking down some of those walls between these, fundraising issues and volunteer coordination issues.
100%. And when it does come to asking them to give again, we don't have to be shy, right? It just make it
Yeah.
an invitation. Keep it light, not a big pressure situation. It could just be a recurring donation, asking them to come back for another shift. A lot of folks like rhythm or routine, right? So if you just said, "Hey,
Yeah.
interested in making this a monthly thing, whether that's time
Mhm.
or dollars," they're
Mhm.
often totally on board and just need a nudge. So remember,
Mhm.
people are human, and sometimes we just need to ask and talk to people, and I think we'd be surprised at the positive outcome that we'd get from that. So
Mhm.
don't be shy and just talk to your donors.
Right. I love that that's the way that we're ending up, because for so many folks, and I've talked to like high level fund development leaders, and even CEOs, and they'll really be candid and vulnerable and talk about the fear that they have for asking.
Mhm.
Um, and wow, that's our own problem. That's in our own head, and
Yeah.
it's something we don't talk enough about. You know.
100%. I think and that's just it, it's just getting out of that mindset that volunteers don't wanna give time and donors don't wanna volunteer, it's just not the case. Like we talked about today, there are so many statistics that just show us that volunteerism and donor, activities do go hand in hand, and so take a step back, look at your database, and even just understand the overlap you might already have. That I think would be really surprising to people as well.
Yeah, I love that you said that. And overlap, another great word, because it shows the link of how we can build, more support for ourselves. And I think, Chloe, it's sustainable. That's the thing. It's
Mhm.
not like this huge, thing that we're so afraid of, like, oh my God, that's a huge donor. If they go away, our organization is really vulnerable. No, I
Right.
mean, it's a different way to build your base and your strength. Well, Chloe Boonstra, what a great conversation. I love this. We need to have more of this. We need to
Yes.
have you back. This is just really, really interesting. Chloe Boonstra, Senior Customer Service Manager over with our friends at Bloomerang. And you can check out bloomerang.com. Bloomerang is really interesting because they are one of the tremendous investors and players in nonprofit thought leadership. And they give this information out to everybody, whether you're a customer or not. There's never a paywall. And so, wow. I mean, Chloe, you gave us some science-based information, and that's just what I find with Bloomerang and the folks that you work with. They're actually doing research and really helping us to be the best that we can be, and so that we can do more exciting things. So thank you for being with us. This was really fun.
Yeah, no, thank you, Julia, for having me. This has just been so fun, and I just love connecting with fellow nonprofit folks. So if anybody wants to keep conversation going, feel free to find me on LinkedIn. Like Julia said, Bloomerang blogs, webinars are all open to everybody. So we've got lots of tons and great resources for fundraising, volunteer management alike. And so there's definitely something for everyone out there. So thank you so much, Julia. It's been so fun.
Good. Well, and these are the things, these are the building blocks that we need to have so we can do our mission, right? We can do our work. So yeah, it's been fabulous. It really has been. Well, it's also fabulous are our amazing presenting sponsors. Again, our friends at Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting, Interns Executive Academy, Your Part-Time Controller, and Fundraisers Friday. Chloe, I know that you've got your long underwear on because you said it snowed this morning. Yes. I'm wearing shorts because it's going to be 100 today. And we are on the same continent. It's a bummer, but that's just the way it goes.
I know, we're really polar opposites.
I know, really. Oh my gosh. But Chloe, one of the things that we do is we end each and every episode with this message, and it's really profound. It means different things every day. And today I'm thinking about weather when I say this. And the message is this: to stay well so you can do well.